Okay, so practice start test number 1. The question number 1, the process of evolution, so we're talking about evolution, depends on variations. Variations, we're talking about genetic variations. Genetic variety. Remember we talked about variety is good? Well, genetic variety is good for evolution. It exists among the individuals in a population. So many individuals in a population have variety. So like humans, we have different colors of hair, different colors of eye, different colors, different heights, different metabolisms, all sorts of different variations, variety of genetic variety. Such variations are favored in sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction means you have mom and dad, and they're both providing half of their DNA and half of their DNA to make one baby, one whole baby. So we get genetic variety from the parents. That's why sexual reproduction is favored to increase that variety. Which of the following process is significant in sexual reproduction? So, following process is significant for sexual reproduction. Well, if we're doing that half a mom, half a dad to make a whole baby, meiosis is the process of making gametes. Gametes are sperm and eggs, ova. So male gametes, female gametes, that's the process of making them. So you need to make them. These are, the following process is significant for sexual reproduction. We have to actually make the gametes for the sexual reproduction to be possible. So that, and it talks about the variation. Remember, in the process of meiosis, we have this step called crossing over. All right, that's a very important step, and it is essential for mixing the DNA. That process is where we mix the DNA so that each offspring gets a unique combination gets a unique genetic combination from each parent. Okay, so that's a good thing. Genetic variety is good. We don't want one generation after the next to be identical. Otherwise, they're all at risk of the same diseases and the same limiting factors. Okay, question number 2. Biological systems are highly organized. All right, so organizing biological systems. The basic unit of all living things is the cell. All right, so that's a fact. The basic unit of all living things, which is a valuable fact to know on the test, is a cell. Cells with a similar structure and similar function are organized. All right, so if I have a bunch of cells, many cells that are similar in structure and similar in function, they organize into tissue. That's what tissue is. That's the definition of tissue. Cells with similar structure and function organized, working together to accomplish a function for the organ. Okay? All right, in 1952, James Watson and Francis Crick proposed the DNA molecule consisted of a double helix. Okay, so we're talking about the double helix of DNA and the scientists who proposed that in 1952. What did these two scientists propose as part of the model of DNA structure? Okay. All right. Is DNA a small molecule? Is it a protein? Does it contain the ribose sugar? Or does it contain nucleotides that form pairs? All right. Well, DNA is certainly not small, okay, because it's a polymer. All right, and it's a very long polymer. So definitely doesn't qualify as small. DNA is not a protein. It is a nucleic acid, as it says in its name, deoxyribonucleic acid. All right, so it's a nucleic acid. It contains the sugar ribose. All right, so remember that phosphate, sugar, and then the base for a nucleotide. All right, this right here is a nucleotide. Well, in DNA, it's deoxyribose sugar, And in RNA, it's ribose sugar. So DNA does not contain ribose sugar, it contains deoxyribose sugar. All right, DNA contains nucleotides that form pairs. So what is it talking about? Well, we're talking about pairs. All right, there's a nucleotide. There's a base pair, for example, A. There's a base A. It pairs with T of another nucleotide that's on the other side. So they form pairs, A with T, just as you would have G with C. So it's definitely D. Okay. Question number 4. In 1980, lava that flowed from the eruption of Mount St. Helens in Washington destroyed the vegetation that once existed in the area. Today, the vegetation has reappeared as a result of... Okay, so we're talking about an eruption, Mount St. Helens. We're talking about lava. We're talking about a volcano. Volcanoes, when they erupt, they kill all the vegetation. They cover everything with brand new rock, and then that rock breaking down into creating the new vegetation. We're talking about ecological succession. That idea of starting with bare rock. This is actually primary ecological succession, because you're starting with bare rock, and then we have pioneer species, and then we get intermediate species, and then we'll get that climax community. Okay. All right. The brain plays an important role in controlling body temperature. Okay. Controlling body temperature. All right. So just stop for a moment. Think about body temperature. All right. If you get too hot, the result is you sweat. Why? To decrease your body temperature. If you get too cold, what do? You shiver. All right, that helps to increase your body temperature. So the goal is to always keep it at the perfect temperature. Okay? The brain receives signals and sends out a message to the body to make the appropriate response. So if you're too hot, your body sends out the response to make you sweat. If you're too cold, the brain sends out the message for the body to shiver, to increase the temperature. Okay? So the brain sends a message, the body responds, the signal, the temperature returns to the brain, and it knows whether it's achieved the temperature it wants or it needs to adjust. So this is that cycle. This is a feedback loop. Specifically because we're trying to either bring it down or pull it back up, always trying to get to that same. This is a negative feedback loop. Always trying to adjust and get back to a specific position. Now the whole purpose of any feedback loop is to achieve homeostasis, which is healthy, happy, and balanced. Whether it's the cellular, whether it's the entire organism, the healthy, happy, and balanced homeostasis is the whole purpose of a feedback loop. We're trying to achieve that homeostasis. In this case, homeostasis of body temperature. You have that perfect ideal temperature you're always trying to achieve. We adjust as needed to achieve that. Okay. Question number 6. Okay, homologies are used as evidence of common ancestry amongst groups. So, common ancestry amongst groups, we're talking about, all right, evolution. All right, homologies is evidence of evolution. Homologies include anatomical, molecular, and developmental evidence. So, evidence of evolution is what it's asking for. So, evidence of evolution, we've talked about homologous structures, where you have the same bone in a human, in a horse, in a bird, in a bat, and in a seal. All right? It's the same bone, it just has a different shape to it for the function of that organism. Similarly, we have the phalanges. All right? There's phalanges in each one of those, which are the finger bones, in each one of those species. All right? So those are all examples of homologous structures. Homologous embryos, we can see that whether it's a fish or a salamander or a tortoise or a chicken or a rabbit or a man, that evolutionary process, that developmental process all starts at the same, they all look identical in that small early fetus stage. And then they'll start to develop, and they start to develop and get more a little bit individualized, but they all go through that same process of starting off what looks kind of like a worm and developing. So that's homologous embryos. All right. Homologous molecules, we're talking about, for example, enzymes, hormones, any other important molecules that are similar between organisms. So like here we have looking at hemoglobin, which is in the blood in all the different species. Okay, on all these species. So anything that has blood, so the human, the monkey, and the more similar they are, the more similar, like human and a monkey, the more similar their blood hemoglobin is. And the more different they are, so like a human to a lamprey, less is in common with those two versions of that molecule. So this is molecular homology. Question goes back and asks which of the following would be an example of developmental homology. So specifically talking about developmental, we're talking about the idea of we're talking about the development of a fetus. All right, so developmental, we're talking about that early stage while you're in the uterus. Okay, so similarities in stages through which embryos pass. Okay, so that homologous embryos is basically homologous developmental stages of the fetus. Okay, all right. An organism must function in a regulated and coordinated manner. This requires, number 7. This requires that a system interacts with one another. Which two body systems are mainly responsible for the interaction that occurs amongst the various body systems? Responsible for regulating. All right, so regulation. Body systems mainly responsible for regulation. Regulating means we're trying to that keyword regulating means to control, to adjust, to make things, to control and adjust. That is definitely your endocrine and your nervous system. Okay, so your nervous system gives the commands, and your endocrine system, which are the hormones. Okay, your hormones are what determine how quickly your autonomic systems function, and your nervous system, like the brain, makes the decisions and then sends out those decisions about what it's going to do. So just to review, the respiratory system, this is about gas exchange. Okay, that's the oxygen and carbon dioxide in the lungs. Okay, circulatory system, that's the blood and the heart, and that blood distributes nutrients and oxygen to all the cells of the body. Digestive system is about breaking down your food, both chemical and mechanical digestion, so that those nutrients get absorbed. And absorb the nutrients. Those nutrients will then go into your blood to be distributed to all the cells in your body. Reproductive system is about having babies. Muscular system is about movement. So when you combine those two, that would be like having a baby. You need the muscles to squeeze the baby out. Okay? Hormones in the brain, those are the ones that control and regulate the rest of them. So the hormones will tell your muscles how hard to, how strong to be, and will cause them to be stronger and stronger. The nervous system tells the muscle to move. Reproductive system is mostly controlled by hormones, and every once in a while the brain gets involved to stimulate the hormones so the baby develops. Circulatory system, your brain tells your heart to pump, and the hormones will tell your heart how fast to pump, and it'll constrict the vessels if it needs to. Digestive system, your brain will tell your digestive system to turn on or turn off, and your hormones will tell it to go faster or go slower. Okay, so these override all the others. The respiratory system, your brain tells your lungs to inhale because it needs more oxygen, and your hormones, if you have like adrenaline, it'll tell you to go faster, to breathe faster if you need more oxygen. So these regulate and control the rest. Number 8, a scientist built a model to show how changes in DNA can occur. The illustration shows the model that the scientist built. So we have an A, B, C, D, E, F, G, so ordered in alphabetical order, and then A, B, C, G, F, E, D, H. Okay, so that one gets a little confusing there. So what changed? All right, so these right here are out of order, and if you look at it, they got switched around. Okay, they got reversed. Each letter in this illustration represents a gene on the model of a chromosome. So this is a chromosome, and each one of those are genes, unique genes. So we have changed the order in which the genes are found on the chromosome. The genes were reversed in order. All right, duplicated would mean extra copy. All right, we definitely don't have an extra copy there. They weren't deleted, that would be removed. All right, so nothing was removed. Transferred to another chromosome, well, they still have the same, it's still the same genes. Same genes, so it's the same chromosome. So it's not another chromosome. So reversed order, that's exactly what happened. Reverse the order. So that's it. Okay, question number 9. Animals have specialized cells for various functions. Which specialized cells serve to protect the body from injury and disease? Cells that protect the body from injury and disease. Okay, so so the blood has immune cells in it, which helps protect from disease, but not really so much injury. The muscle, okay, muscle, its purpose is motion. Okay, epithelium. When you see epithelium, think skin, and your skin protects you from disease by keeping it the first barrier against disease. So it's the first barrier to keep out back diseases. I should say keep out pathogens, whether it's viruses or bacteria, keep out pathogens. And it protects from injury. So think about how many times you've hurt yourself, cut yourself, and it was the skin that healed rather than having cut a muscle or something. Nerves, not so much protection and have very little to do with diseases. So they control, but they don't protect. Okay. Okay, epithelium is the best choice, but blood is arguable under the right conditions. So, not the best question, but that's the best answer. Just because we're talking about skin, and that is the two primary functions of the skin: protect from injury and disease. Okay, so the Texas state mammal is an armadillo. These animals have a brownish green color that helps them blend in with their environment. Okay, blend with their environment, we're talking about camouflage. All right, scientists were collecting data to determine how well his body coloring protected the armadillos against predators. What were these studying? So, body color protecting against predators. So they were protecting reproductive ability. Reproductive is about having babies. All right. World armadillos in the food chain. Okay, so we're talking about whether it's a producer, consumer, decomposer. All right, what it eats, that sort of stuff. Okay, not so much about, that really doesn't have much to do against predators, especially protecting against predators. Okay, changing the size of the armadillo population. So size of population, not so much. Adaptations. Adaptations are traits, attributes, characteristics that help an organism survive. Organ survival, is all about avoiding predators using camouflage. Okay, so that's definitely your answer. J. Okay, there are several mechanisms that play a role in evolution. One of them is natural selection. Another mechanism is, okay, so natural selection. All right, so natural selection, the 4 principles of natural selection: the overproduction, many more offspring are produced than will live to adulthood. So you lay thousands of eggs, but only to actually become frogs. Inherited variation, within a population, there's a lot of unique variety. So different hair color, different size, different, all those unique traits within variation. Variety is good within a population. Competition, so the individuals in the population will compete for food, water, and habitat. Those, there's just not enough food for everybody to thing. And so those that survive selection to adulthood, that are able to compete successfully because of the inherited variations they have, they will actually survive to adulthood and will pass their good genes that allow them to survive onto the next generation. Okay? So, 4 principles of natural selection. So, the other role in evolution, what else plays a role in evolution? So, going through those options. So, we have taxonomy. This is classification. All right, so think like the domain, kingdom, phylum, etc. Okay, that really isn't, that might demonstrate some evolutionary relationships, but it's not actually a mechanism of evolution. Mechanism is what actually makes it happen. Fossil formation, okay, the formation of a fossil is the process of making a fossil, so the process of a dead animal becoming a fossil. So dead thing converting to a fossil doesn't actually have anything to do with evolution. We can see evolution in the fossil record, okay? So an evidence of evolution is the fossil record, but not the process of actually making the fossil. So we can see that change over time, but the actual making of the fossil has nothing to do with evolution. Okay? Mitosis is normal cell division. All right, normal cell division actually has very little to do with evolution because this has everything to do with the growth of a single organism. So growth of a single organism is mitosis. Recombination. Recombination, also known as crossing over, is the mixing of DNA during meiosis, which is the making of the gametes and the sperm and eggs. So, recombination, mixing the DNA, mixing of the DNA allows for genetic variety, which is a key component of evolution, because we need to have variety so that some survive and some don't. Okay, question number 12. A student develops a hypothesis that plants that sexually reproduce, okay, plants that sexually reproduce are better adapted to the environments than plants that reproduce only by asexual means. This student knows that a hypothesis must be testable. Okay, so sexually reproducing plants. Sexually reproducing plants, we're talking about flowers, okay? So flowers, we have the anther and the filament, which combined become a stamen. The stamen is the male part of the flower. It's covered in pollen. That's the sperm. The stigma, the style, and down there at the bottom, center of the flower is the ovary. Again, stigma, style, ovary. That is the female part. So the sperm gets attached to the stigma. The sticky nectar goes down and fertilizes the ova, which are there and waiting at the bottom, and then develops into seeds. Okay, so that idea of sexual reproduction, you can get the pollen by bees and birds collecting nectar. Will get pollen from one plant and fly to the next plant and drop off pollen, pick up pollen from that plant and go to the next one, and that way you have mixing of genetics from one plant to the other using the birds and the bees. So it provides genetic variation because we're crossing the different plants. So if we're looking at sexual reproduction, all right, of a plant, okay, we have to have the two different parents, all right, sexual reproduction, two parents, and therefore we have the flower involved in that, making that possible. Okay, Punnett square can be used to model what can happen in genetic crosses. The illustration below shows a Punnett square. The letter R represents allele for round. 3 of the 4 offspring of the round phenotype. What does this Punnett square illustrate? Okay, so this is a monohybrid cross. That's the answer, because we have 4 squares. A dihybrid cross, just so you are aware, okay, a dihybrid cross is when we have the big box with 16 squares, okay? So that's a dihybrid cross. So monohybrid, the mono is referring to a pair of alleles, okay? So we have, so R, round, wrinkled, that sort of thing, so that pair of alleles, just one pair of alleles. This would be 2 pairs of alleles, so the dihybrid would be like round and wrinkled and yellow and green. Okay, so there you have shape and color, where this one was only shape. Okay, non-Mendelian inheritance. So non-Mendelian inheritance, clarifying what that is actually the non-traditional. So Mendelian inheritance. If I could spell right, that would help. Okay, Mendelian inheritance. Herencia Mendelian. We're talking about dominant and recessive. the super simple, obvious, uppercase, lowercase, dominant, recessive sort of thing going on. All right. Non-Mendelian are all the variety ones. So all the ones that are a little odd. So we have the codominance, multiple alleles, multiple genes controlling the same trait, incomplete dominance, all of those are, this is polygenic, polygenic traits. Okay, those are all things that don't follow the simple dominant or recessive. Incomplete dominance is when you have like R for red and little r for white, and that actually comes out pink. Okay, so this is supposed to be red and this is supposed to be white, but in reality it comes out pink. We actually will usually draw that more like, they'll usually draw it more like a color red and a color white. Okay, so codominance and incomplete dominance are very, very, very similar. Okay. Biomolecules, including lipids, proteins, carbohydrates, and nucleic acid. Which of the following is a correct match? Okay, so lipids are not paired with amino acids. Proteins are not paired with nucleotides. Carbohydrates are paired with sugars. Nucleic acids are not paired with enzymes. So, where should they be? So, proteins should have amino acids. Okay, this is the monomer. Lipids, this could be fatty acids or glycerol. Both of those are subunits of lipids. Nucleic acids would be DNA or RNA. Okay, but carbohydrates pairs with sugars. Okay, moving on. 15. Okay, so scientists report their findings in professional publications or scientific journals. One scientist wrote an article titled "The Rapid Growth of Cancer Cells in Tissue Culture." What was the scientist most likely studying? Okay, so cancer. A cancer cell. A cancer cell is a cell that has uncontrolled growth, and therefore that means it divides frequently, again in an uncontrolled way. So one cell becomes 2 cells, becomes 4 cells, etc., 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 and you end up like with like a tumor. It's a mass of a bunch of unwanted cells. Okay, that is very, very, very common in these. So we're talking about cell cycle. Okay, so cancer cells are all about uncontrolled growth, frequent dividing, the cell cycle, the mitosis. All right, cell division. That's all kind of on the same topic there. How are we doing? All right, Texas Longhorn cattle are resistant to various microorganisms. Resistant to microorganisms, we're talking about immune system, and we're talking about pathogens, and that can include viruses and bacteria. All right, that could otherwise infect them with various diseases. These microorganisms would benefit by obtaining nutrients from the cattle. However, the cattle would be harmed because of the disease they would develop. As a result, longhorn cattle are resistant to many microorganisms known as... All right, so these microorganisms, now we don't have bacteria, viruses here, okay? But they do give a very key phrase here. The microorganisms benefit by obtaining nutrients from the cattle. However, the cattle would be harmed because of the disease they would develop. So, one benefits, the other one is harmed. When we have that sort of a relationship, we have a parasitic relationship. Competition, remember, is when they're fighting each other for the they're fighting each other. Predators, one is happy because they ate and the other one's dead. All right, decomposers is the ones where they break down things and turn it back into nutrients in the soil. Number 17, in 1859, Charles Darwin published the theory of natural selection. Part of his theory stated that organisms that were adapted to their environment were more likely to survive and have offspring. This part of his theory is determined as, okay, so more likely to survive and have offspring. That is the idea of differential reproductive success. Okay? Limited resource availability, that's also known as competition. Okay? Inherited variations, that's the genetic variety within a population. Within a population. And overproduction of offspring, that's lots of babies, knowing that you'll have few adults result from those babies. Okay, so differential reproductive success. All right, reproductive success. Reproductive is babies, have babies. All right, not all of them will have success having babies. So it's different from each other. So differential reproductive success. All right, number 18. Cellular reactions depend on enzymes. Enzymes, yay, enzymes. So we talked about enzymes. We've done enzyme graphs. The graph below shows the results of student obtained when she investigated 2 different enzymes. Okay, so enzyme A and enzyme B. We've got all sorts of interesting information about enzymes A and B here in these graphs. Okay, so I would first kind of just like analyze the graph. Enzyme A gets that special peak right there, maximum at 2 pH. All right. Enzyme B, all right, it hits its peak there somewhere around 6 pH. Okay. It's got a slightly larger range, so anywhere kind of like from 5 to 7. Yeah, 5 to 6. Okay, so what is an inference? Okay, cool. There's a word. Inference. What we can assume. All right, assume, an assumption. Adivinar, based upon what information is provided. So we can assume, and the key to making an inference, it's not a fact. So the facts in this case, enzyme A has a high reactivity is best reactivity at pH of 2. Enzyme B has the best reactivity around 5 or 6. Not a fact. Let's see. So an enzyme A functions best at a pH of 2. That's a fact. Neither enzyme A nor enzyme B will function at pH of 12. Well, that we don't know. The graph doesn't show anything about 12. So it would be, how can I say this? The fact that it peaks, that enzyme A peaks here and enzyme B peaks here, it's highly, highly unlikely that either of them comes up to peak again. So it's highly, highly plausible that neither one will function at pH of 12. Okay, both enzymes work best in the same conditions. We obviously know that those are different conditions, so that is that's a false statement. And enzyme B functions at a higher pH than enzyme A. No, enzyme A functions at a higher pH, and so that one's false. All right, so that one's a fact, those two are false. This one is a safe assumption, okay? So a safe assumption, an educated guess. Those are all ways to think about an inference. Okay, so that's definitely got to be G. Okay, the genome of an organism consists of all the genetic information contained in the DNA, makes up the chromosome. Scientists use various techniques to investigate the genome of an organism. Look closely at this illustration below. When you see an illustration like this, all of those paired chromosomes all lining up, you should look at this and go, oh, that's a karyotype. Okay? Scientists can collect both qualitative and quantitative data from the technique that is illustrated above. This technique was used, which technique was used in this case? Okay? So this karyotype, all right, is a form of chromosomal analysis because we are looking at, those are chromosomes. And we can analyze them. They're analyzed, setting up them in pairs. So there's pair 1, pair 2, pair blah, 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 all the way to the end. DNA fingerprinting, that's the one that's like the bands, and you match up like A, B, C, or D. Okay? Gene modification, also known as genetic engineering. This is having glow-in-the-dark rabbits, okay, where we put the gene from one species into another species, or we modify the gene that's there so it maybe is no longer defective. Gene expression, that's the dominant, gene expression is where we're talking about genes that are turned on and off, or turned off to determine cell type. Well, to determine whether it's a blood cell, or whether it's a muscle cell, or whether it's an epithelial cell. All right, so determining cell type. So this is definitely a chromosome analysis. We're analyzing the chromosomes. All right, moving on, number 20. Okay, the theory that the cell does not, number 20, cell theory does not include viruses. Viruses are not part of it. Why? Viruses are not considered living things. That is true. Viruses cannot reproduce. That is true. Viruses do not contain genetic information. That is false. They do contain genetic information. Viruses do not contain organelles such as nuclei. That is true. So why? So the cell theory does not include viruses because cell theory states all living things are made of one or more cells. All cells come from other cells, and the cells are the fundamental unit and structure of all living things. So they're not part of the cell theory because they're not considered living things. All right, they're not living things. That's why they're not part of cell theory, because cell theory is all about the living things. Okay. All right. In Texas, longhorn cattle eat grass. People eat the cattle. What can you construct from this information? So, the cows, not just any cow, are longhorn cows. Okay, our longhorn cows, they eat grass, and people eat the cows. We can construct a food chain. Okay, one path of feeding relationships, the arrows point to the thing that's doing the eating, and from the thing that's being eaten, the direction of the flow of energy. Okay. Scientists use similarities and differences to place organisms in categories. Categorizing organisms. These categories make up a hierarchical classification system. Which category represents the level where organisms are most alike? So, domain, kingdom, phylum, class. So, domain, kingdom, phylum, class. So, dumb King Philip came over for good spaghetti. Class, order, family, genus, species. All right, most alike, it's got to be down here. Oh, well, there we go. Most alike. Oh, wait. Yeah. There you go. Where species were the most alike, then they're the same species. Okay? This would be the least alike because they're the least similar because it's the very top. Cool. 23. This is a really bad question. They were attempting to get you to practice the word inference. Bad question. So this is set up so that DNA replication occurs in the S stage, DNA synthesis. That's a fact. Growth occurs in either a G1 or G2 stage. It doesn't say anything about growth, so we're going to leave it there. The cell divides during M stage, so mitosis replies, so that's a fact. All right, the cells that leave the cycle do not go through M stage. Well, they leave the cycle. Cells that cease division. M stage is division, so they leave the cell cycle, so that's a fact. So the only one that's an inference, because we can assume it based upon the information provided, it's got to grow at some time, so it must be growing during that stage. That is a bad question. Don't worry, they won't look like that on the star. A scientist measuring the level of blood glucose in several people, she observed that blood glucose levels always remained within a certain range. Ooh, key phrase here. Always remained within a certain range. She concluded that maintenance of homeostasis, ooh, another phrase, maintenance of homeostasis, maintaining homeostasis in these individuals was a result of an internal feedback mechanism. Internal feedback mechanisms have the purpose of maintaining homeostasis. Maintaining homeostasis, which is that happy, healthy, balanced levels in your glucose, your balanced blood glucose levels. Ding ding. All right. Thermoregulation is an example of an internal feedback system. Enzyme function, that is about pH and temperature. Energy conversion, that's like the mitochondria. ATP, so the mitochondria doing cellular respiration, or the chloroplast doing photosynthesis. But yes, this is about maintaining homeostasis. Question number 25. Both photosynthesis and respiration involve energy conversions. Both photosynthesis and respiration are also involved in the... Ooh. All right, so energy conversions, but they're also part of the carbon cycle. Because remember we talked about the carbon dioxide, and it goes out of us, so we breathe out carbon dioxide. And then the plant takes in the carbon dioxide and turns it into sugar, and then we eat that sugar, and then we breathe out carbon dioxide. Sugar is C6H12O6. So we're talking about the cycling of carbon through carbon cycle. All right, student use a Punnett square as a model to show what happens when a Snapdragon plant with red flowers. Ooh, red flowers. Is crossed with a plant that has white flowers. Ooh, Punnett square. Red flowers, white flowers. Beautiful. Notice all the progeny. Progeny, that's another word for offspring, which is another word for the babies. Have the genotype RW. This indicates that they have pink flowers. Huh? So notice they're both uppercase R and uppercase W. What type of inheritance pattern did the student model in her Punnett square? All right, so is one of these, is R or W dominant over the other? No. Is one recessive? No. We have here incomplete dominance. It's not really 100% red. It's not really 100% white. Neither one is really 100% dominant. Inheritance of a trait controlled by many genes. Many genes, it doesn't do, you don't do the Punnett squares with those. So that would be a completely different example. We're only talking about the one gene. So, ta-da! All right, plants carry out both photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Again, we're talking about plants. Which is a reactant in photosynthesis and a product in cellular respiration? Okay, well, I'm just going to draw them out here. So, photosynthesis. All right, chemical reaction. The plant takes in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and water through its roots. And we use a little bit of sunlight here. And it will produce sugar, C6H12O6, which is the glucose sugar. And it will produce oxygen, which releases into the atmosphere. And then we do the opposite. The inverse of that is cellular respiration. We take that C6H12O6 glucose that you eat and the oxygen, which you breathe in, and the chemical reaction in the mitochondria will produce carbon dioxide, which you exhale, and water, which you pee out. So, boom. We want a reactant in photosynthesis. So reactants are what's in the beginning, a reactant in photosynthesis, and a product in cellular respiration, products are what you end with. What is in both of those? Well, carbon dioxide and water. So water, of the options, water is both a reactant in photosynthesis and a product in cellular respiration. Question number 28. The fossil record serves as evidence of evolution. In some cases, the fossil record shows gradual changes in species over time. In other cases, the fossil record shows sudden appearance of a species. Which theory explains the sudden appearance of a new species in the fossil record? Okay? Sudden appearance. Sudden appearance is what we call punctuated equilibrium. It's just one of those terms that applies to evolution. Punctuated is kind of a sudden sort of change. Okay? Yeah. What they described up here, this description up here of gradual changes in species over time, that is gradualism. So it wasn't that one because it's something different. Okay, a skin cell is an example of a eukaryotic cell. A bacterium living in your large intestine is an example of a prokaryotic cell. What would you see with a microscope if you look closely into your skin cell that you would not observe in your bacterial cell? So, eukaryotic and prokaryotic. What are we going to find here that we are not going to find here? Okay, so membrane, they both have membranes. Chromosomes, that's part about DNA, they both are going to have chromosomes. Okay? Mitosis, this is cell division. They both do cell division. Mitochondria is an organelle, complex organelle, and those are only found in eukaryotic organisms. So in the cells of a eukaryotic organism. There we go. All right, under favorable conditions, a population will grow in size. Look closely at the graph below, which shows the growth of a population over time. Population size and time. And it grows. Why did the population stop growing? So why, it's asking here, that stopped growing, why didn't it just keep on going? It actually kind of like leveled off, okay? Why? Because reproductive rate increased? Nah. Resource bases such as food are limited. Okay, that is true. Resource such as food is limited. Individuals exhibited more adaptations to their environment. Adaptations has a little bit more to do with evolution. More adaptations would increase survival, which would therefore increase population, and that's not what's happening here. That's the opposite. We have a decrease in population, so that's not it. Okay? And carbon and nitrogen carbon cycle stopped operating. If that is, all things would die. All things would die if those two systems stopped working, and I don't know why on earth they would. It's kind of an awkward, like, that doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, definitely that idea that resources are limited, and resources are limited, it reached its carrying capacity. It's reaching carrying capacity. So that capacity. It's reaching carrying capacity, which means it's reaching at the maximum population that can be maintained in that ecosystem. All right, moving on. Okay, a student builds a model that shows what happens when a gene is expressed. Gene expression. If a gene is expression, that means the gene which is the code for the protein means the protein is made. Another way of saying protein being made is protein synthesis. All right, the illustration below shows the student's model. So, few things looking at this. If you're kind of confused with what you're looking at, look carefully at what you can see. So we have this ATC, ATCC, ATTGG. So this thing right here, hopefully in your mind you're like, oh, I recognize that. ATGGTAACC, hopefully you're like, oh, and look at that shape. We have here DNA. Ah. And even though you don't see it going on, this is DNA. And then you take a close look and like, well, wait a second. But this, now wait a second here. But this says U, A, C, U, A. That's not quite the same. It doesn't have the T in it. It has the U. And if you look at it, it's a slightly different color. So these are a little bit different. And you have that DNA is opened up, and you have just that, and just one strand here is forming of this. This is mRNA. And this process is all being done by this big, huge blob thing. And that big, huge blob thing right there. This round circle here is what's doing this encapsulating this process. So if we an mRNA is being made using a DNA as a template, and this blob around it must be RNA polymerase. Because RNA polymerase is creating the RNA polymer, they are modeling in all of this the process of transcription. This is the first step of protein synthesis. The second step of protein synthesis is translation. And that happens out in the cytoplasm using the ribosome. And transfer RNAs that bring in amino acids to produce the protein. Okay. 32. When Charles Darwin proposed his theory of natural selection, he pointed out that diversity was important. Diversity is important. Diversity is good. All right? Variety is good. Diversity was important for the survival of species. His theory stated that organisms with certain traits are more likely to survive and reproduce. Organisms that are more likely to survive, all right, are always the strongest members of the species, carry only traits determined by dominant alleles, reproduce asexually, or possess necessary adaptations to changes that occur in the environment. Okay, so this is exactly what we're talking about with Charles Darwin. We're talking about evolution. Evolution is all about that idea of adaptations to changes in the environment means you will survive. Okay, so it isn't always about strength. All right, it might be about size, it might be about metabolism, it might be about color, okay? Dominant versus recessive, you'd be surprised how many recessive alleles are actually make you immune to diseases. Reproduction asexually, this is bad for variety. All right, asexual reproduction is bad for diversity. Sexual reproduction creates more diversity, so that's kind of contrary to it and everything. Dominant versus recessive, that's not really directly related to evolution, but adaptations are directly related to evolution. Okay, 33. Tissues and organs in plants interact to form various functions. Which of the following correctly shows the tissues or organs that perform the described function? Okay, so stamen and pistil, we're talking about, okay, roots and stems, phylum, xylem, phloem, leaves and buds. We're all talking about plants. All right, so plant systems, the stamen and the pistil, okay, we're talking about reproduction. We're talking about parts of the flower. Okay, roots and stems, we're talking about not photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is about the leaves, okay? Xylem and phloem, they are transportation, that's it. So xylem transports water. All right, phloem transports water and minerals. Sorry. Phloem transports mostly glucose or some form of energy, food. Okay. Okay, so xylem and phloem transport leaves and buds. Buds, flower buds, are about reproduction, but leaves are not about reproduction. Okay, so transportation, this is also a question of vascular tissue. Any sort of vascular tissue is about transportation as well. Excuse me. In 1961, two scientists proposed a mechanism that involves gene expression. They developed a model based on how enzymes were produced in bacteria. Their model involved certain genes that control the expression of other genes. According to the model, certain genes produce proteins that inhibit other genes from carrying out transcription. Based on this information, you can conclude about gene expression. Okay, gene expression. This is the turning on genes on or off. Okay, whether a gene is on or whether a gene is off. That's what gene expression is about. Okay, if you read it through here carefully, we have here this proteins that inhibit other genes from carrying out transcription. So, inhibit, prohibit, prevent, stop, limit. So if the genes can't carry out transcription, which is the first step of protein synthesis, if there's no transcription, then that protein isn't made, that gene is not expressed. Gene expression is a regulated process, only occurs in bacteria. What they're talking about is in bacteria, but they're developing how genes work in bacteria is similar to how it works in ours and us. Gene expression does not involve RNA. RNA isn't even mentioned in here, so I don't know what that's about. Gene expression operates the same way in all organisms. It's not comparing all organisms, okay? It's just giving a model based upon what they've seen in bacteria. So that's not what that's about. It's not talking about RNA. So gene expression is a regulated process. Regulated means controlled, adjusted, adjust when you need, so regulated process. Kind of a weak question, but oh well. 1952, scientists conduct an experiment involving bacteria and viruses. Based on the results, they concluded the genetic information was stored in, so protein, lipid, nucleic acid, or carbohydrate. Genetic information is all about nucleic acid. Deoxyribonucleic acid. Nucleic acid, that's DNA. Okay, ribonucleic acid. RNA. DNA and RNA, nucleic acid, genetic information. You should have all of those associated with each other in your mind. Moving on. Number 36. In 1900, the deadliest weather disaster to strike the United States happened in Texas. That year, a very powerful hurricane hit Galveston. Some reports estimated that as many as 12,000 people were killed, mainly by the flooding that occurred. What else did the floods represent? Okay, so horrific example of lots of people dying and dying and dying. What else does the flood do? What else does the flood do? All right, is it a new resource base for consumers? I don't see anything about new resources in there. All right, a new link in the food chain, that would be a new organism that's affecting the food chain? No. An environmental change that impacted ecosystem stability? All right, that's definitely an environmental change. It impacted ecosystem stability. Probably true. Or an example of ecological succession. Ecological succession is when you have to start. We're not starting over. All right, so ecological succession is a start over. Okay, when a flood comes in, it doesn't take out all living things and all plants. It'll just take out some of them. Usually the grass is still there, the trees are still there, just some of the stuff gets taken out. So we're not doing a start over. So it's not ecological succession. It's an environmental change that impacted the ecosystem stability because many things were affected, but it recovered very quickly. Organ systems interact in animals to perform certain functions, such as delivering nutrients to every cell in the organism. The illustration below shows one organ system that is involved in this function. Okay. Delivering nutrients to every cell in the organism. This system is the digestive system. All right? It breaks down food to absorb the nutrients in your food, but it doesn't do the delivering of nutrients. What system's going to work with it to deliver nutrients? That would be the circulatory system, which is the blood, which is transportation. All right, nutrients to all the cells of the body. Okay. Number 38, several lines of evidence are used to support evolution. One line of evidence includes molecular homologies. Okay, so talking about molecular homologies. Which of the following would be an example of this type of evidence? So, molecular homologies. Comparison of a feature such as a forelimb in different species. This is homologous structures. Oh, shoot. Hemoglobin, comparison of hemoglobin, that is a molecule, specifically a protein. And yes, that would be the answer, homologous. Geographical distribution of a species, this is geobiography. Geobiology, no. What's it called? Got it backwards. Biogeography. All right, and comparison of embryological development of different species. That's, well, embryo homologies. All right, so definitely hemoglobin is the molecular one. Okay, genetic code is found in the DNA of an organism. Which statement about the genetic code is correct? All organisms contain the same genetic code? No, not at all. All organisms contain different genetic codes. Okay, the genetic code is found only in eukaryotic cells? No. They're in prokaryotic cells too. In prokaryotic cells, it's found, the DNA is in the cytoplasm. Okay, I should just cross out the only. It is in eukaryotic cells in the nucleus, and the prokaryotic cells is in the cytoplasm. Okay, the components that make up the genetic code are common in all organisms. So the components, we're talking about the nucleotides. Okay, that is true. So your DNA, the phosphate, sugar, base, all right, that deoxyribose sugar, and the bases being A, T, G, and C. Okay, those are all the same. RNA, phosphate, sugar, base. All right, this has the A with U, the G, and the C. All right, this is the deoxyribose sugar. This is the ribose sugar. These are identical. The nucleotides are identical in all offspring, so that's common to all organisms. All organisms change genetic code before passing on the offspring? No, they do not change their genetic code. They mix their genetic code before passing it to their offspring. A student followed the proper safety procedures when mixing chemicals. She mixed a solution that contained a protein with a solution that contained a carbohydrate. Then she placed a drop of mixture on a slide to observe under a microscope. The student observed clumps where the protein and carbohydrates had organized into simple structures. What topic was the student studying in her class?
I have no idea.
So, protein synthesis is about making proteins. She wasn't making proteins. Fermentation is about using energy. All right, like cellular respiration, but without oxygen. So she wasn't depriving anything of oxygen, so that wouldn't work. Differentiation, we're talking about gene expression. She wasn't controlling any gene expression here. What she's talking about was origin of life. Origin of life is how the first organisms were formed. From simple biomolecules. Okay, so that's what she was studying. It's actually a pretty fascinating topic.
Yeah.
Question number 41. Plants respond to stimuli such as light and gravity. So we're talking about plants.
Is that not
responding?
Is that not homeostasis?
No. Homeostasis is about being healthy, happy, and balanced. Okay? But if you're responding to your stimuli, such as light and gravity, these responses are called tropism. Because remember, phototropism is when a plant bends towards the light, and gravitropism is what the reason why the leaves grow up, the stems grow up, and the roots grow down. So tropisms is a plant responding to stimuli. That's tropisms.
Man, what about letter D? What about letter D? What about
Decomposition is the breaking down of dead things. So breaking down of dead things, we're talking, this is what insects do, this is what fungus does, this is what bacteria do. These are all different decomposers. Mutualism is that relationship between two organisms where they both benefit. You want to just watch? The illustration shows the human immune system. What is the immune system for? It's to protect us from
bacteria, diseases,
pathogens, which include both bacteria
and
viruses. Very good. Okay, so we have tonsils and adenoids, lymph nodes and lymphatic vessels, the thymus, the spleen, lymph nodes, bone marrow, because that's where a lot of those cells are made, lymph nodes, lymphatic vessels. Okay, so which two body systems interact with the immune system to protect the body against disease? So, things that are mentioned here, if we look at these, what do they do? So lymph nodes and lymph vessels are part of the lymphatic system, but it's not mentioned in the lymphatic system here. So in these cases, probably considering this lymphatic system is actually part of the immune system. So other things that are involved, the thymus. The thymus is part of the endocrine system.
So it's letter
All right.
G.
Bone marrow is part of the skeletal system. All right. Spleen. Gosh, that one kind of covers all sorts of systems. But based upon the information provided.
What about circulatory?
Circulatory. Circulatory is very necessary because it moves the
Blood.
It moves the blood.
And it is right there, right? Like in the body?
It's not mentioned in the diagram, but yes, the circulatory system, it helps move the blood, and the immune cells can move in that blood. So skeletal system produces some of those cells. I would say the muscular system doesn't really do a lot with the immune system. Digestive and respiratory, not so much involved with the immune system. Nervous and endocrine, nervous doesn't have much direct involvement. So
It's not G.
lots of fascinating options there, but I think the best option is definitely going to be, given the options provided, skeletal and circulatory.
And one question. Why is it skeleton?
Because in the bone marrow, and that's why they're showing you this illustration. Immune system, so the bone marrow is involved in the immune system because some of those cells, the immune system cells, are made in the bone marrow. Okay, 43. Taxonomic groups include archaea, bacteria, protists, fungi, plants, and animals. Which two groups share the characteristics of being able to break down dead organisms? So, of the ones listed, breaking down dead organisms, we just talked about that. Those are decomposers. Are animals decomposers? No. Are plants decomposers? No. Are fungi decomposers? Yes. Are protists decomposers? Some of them are, some of them aren't. Are bacteria decomposers? Yes. Archaea?
Yeah.
Some are, some aren't.
Why? Why?
Because that's way more detailed than you actually have to know.
Okay.
So, best option of, so protists and plants, definitely not plants. Bacteria and fungi, that's a really good option. Plants and animals, definitely neither of those. Archaea and protists, some archaea, some protists, bacteria and fungi are definitely the best option. Okay, a student was planning an experiment that involved a genetic cross. The student wanted to perform a cross so that a trait that does not appear in the parents did appear in the offspring. So, it does not appear in the parents, but it did appear in the offspring. So, for that to happen, here, this one has the dominant trait, this one has the recessive trait. So, the two different options are appearing in the parent, so that's not going to work. Both these parents are recessive, and if you cross two recessive parents, two homozygous recessive parents, all offspring will have the same homozygous recessive, so all the offspring will look just like the parents. Here we have a heterozygous cross. Two parents are heterozygous, so the offspring, 3 of those offspring will look like the parents with the dominant, but 1 and 4, right there, will show that other trait. Okay, so it appears in the offspring, but it did not appear in the parents because these parents have the dominant trait. So it appears. The parents, you don't see that recessive allele that they have, but it does appear in the offspring. So that is the best answer. And this one, if you want to just check this one real fast, the last one, J, all of the offspring have a dominant allele, therefore all the offspring only have the dominant phenotype.
What about what about those ones?
Okay, because they have the dominant allele, they have the dominant phenotype, that uppercase D, whatever that D is. You don't see that lowercase d.
Okay.
But this, you see that lowercase d in some of the offspring, but you don't see it in the parents. Okay, 45. A student set up a model of a cell by using a piece of dialysis tubing. Okay, so this thing right here is a dialysis tubing. Dialysis tubing is that stuff we used when we did those experiments in the tubes, and I made a video of it. Okay, so dialysis tubing. And we're trying to model a cell. The students fill the tubing with salt solution and then place in a beaker of water. The illustration shows the difference in concentration of water between the inside and the outside of the tubing. Okay, so those little dots are representing water molecules. Make sure you understand that. Okay, water molecules. So, predict that what will happen to the model of the cell using the experiment. Well, if I kind of look at this, it looks to me like the water is more concentrated on the outside of the cell, which means the water is going to want to move in so that the concentration is the same. So water will move into the dialysis tubing, causing it to swell. Swell means getting bigger. So the cell that looks like, no, I should draw like this. The cell that looks like this is going to look like that. It's going to look like it's filled up a little bit.
So it's going inside.
The water's going to go inside because the concentration of water is greater on the outside.
Ma'am,
So we need to make it the same
passive transport active?
Passive. Water is always a passive transport. Okay, number 46. Student went out on a whale watch trip with her parents. Soon after they left, they spotted a whale. The student also spotted barnacles covering the whale's flippers. Okay. So barnacles covering the whale's flippers.
What is barnacles?
Yeah. Okay, so picture the flipper on the whale.
What?
Okay, let's try it. Okay, artistic ability is not my greatest, but here, we're gonna try this. Okay, that's the whale. This is the flipper. We're gonna look at it up close. There's these things that are attached to it that are called barnacles. Okay, she pointed out to her parents the barnacles and the whale have a symbiotic relationship. Ooh, there's this key word, a symbiotic relationship. The barnacles benefited by being carried through the water so they can get food. So the barnacles, they benefit. All right, she also informed her parents the barnacles did not harm the whale. So the whale doesn't get hurt by the barnacles. Proud of what she learned in science class, the student told her parents this was an example of, so the whale, he's not hurt, he's not benefited, he just doesn't care. So this type of relationship is called commensalism.
Why?
Mutualism is when they both benefit. Competition is when they both want the same resources. And parasitism is where one benefits and the other one is hurt. Commensalism is this right here, this scenario. Okay. Organisms, populations, and communities respond to external factors. So this is the environment. Which would be an external factor that would cause a population to increase in size. All right?
Ma'am, is decrease.
Oh, sorry. Decrease in size, so we want population to go down. All right? Introducing a predator, increased resources. That resources we're talking about food, water, habitat. Okay? Increase the number of producers, depending on what kind of population, whether we're talking about. Elimination of competition. All right? Eliminating competition would be increasing the population because it would have a greater chance for growing. Increasing resources would increase population. This will also increase population. So those don't work. Increasing the number of producers. It's hard to say because we don't know what that species is, but introduction of predator definitely will decrease population because the predator's going to eat them up. 48. Every organism has a scientific name. For examples, humans are Homo sapiens. What do the two terms represent in terms of hierarchical classification system? So, the scientific name, the first name, and the second name. We'd established that before. That is your genus and species. Genus, species. Bye-bye. A student drew the illustration below as a model of what happens sometimes inside the nucleus of a cell. Okay, so what is this student modeling? So you see this thing going along, and then we have the CTT and then CAT. Well, hopefully you look at that and you're like, oh, that looks like DNA because it has the T in it. And if there's a change, so the T became an A, we had a change there. We are demonstrating a change in DNA, and that by definition is mutation. 50, ecological succession changes populations and species diversity. So it all starts off with bare rock. All right, so at least primary. Starts off with bare rock, and then we get the pioneer species. And then we get the intermediate species. And then we get the climax community. Okay, that climax community is the end, what marks the end of ecological succession. And climax community just means a stable community. So the appearance of a stable community, it's not going to keep changing anymore. It's already at its stabilized. Okay, 51, look closely at the following sequence of events. Okay, the phage attaches itself to the cell. The phage injects its DNA into the host cell. The DNA is replicated by the host cell. The host manufactures new particles. The new particles burst out of the cell, destroying the cell. All right, hopefully as you're reading that, it's all kind of coming to light and remembering the virus cycles, the lytic. Okay, it's talking about a virus. This is the phage. It attaches to the cell. Okay, injects its DNA into the host. The DNA replicates, and more of those phages are made. So the host manufactures the new particles. The new particles then burst out of the cell. Okay, so we are describing viral reproduction. Okay, hopefully that was fairly obvious. Virus cycles. All right, question number 52. Body systems interact to perform certain functions such as reproduction. The menstrual cycle involves changes that occur in the reproductive system of a female. The body system responsible for bringing about those changes. So the body system that is responsible for the changes in the menstrual cycle is the endocrine system, because that's all about hormones. And your menstrual cycles are controlled by hormones. Okay, diversity in a species is important to the process of natural selection. Natural selection, we're talking about evolution. For example, the graph below plots the number of rabbits versus their average running speed. So average running speed, so slow rabbits, fast rabbits, running speed of the average predator. So that's how fast your average predator runs. So if the rabbits can run faster, they will survive better. So these over here on the center of the graph will survive better. Notice that the rabbits show a diversity of running speeds. Which of the following terms applies to those rabbits whose running speed is to the right of the dotted line? If they're going to survive better, they have adapted. All right? They have a trait that increases possibility for survival. That's what adapted means, or adaptation. An adaptation is a trait that increases the possibility for survival. Adapted means they have the trait that increases the possibility for survival. Okay, 54. Last question. Scientists obtain quantitative data by measuring, for example, they can measure the energies present at each level in the ecological pyramid. The illustration below is an example, all right? So the energy of the producers and the energy of the primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers, etc. What does this ecological pyramid represent? All right, a model replacement of one community by another, that is ecological succession. That is not what we are demonstrating here. A model of the flow of matter and energy through an ecosystem. Okay, So we have energy and population size. So we definitely have energy. Matter's questionable. We'll see if this is a possible answer, maybe not the best answer. Let's see. A model of cycles that operate in ecosystems. Are we talking about cycles? Pyramid doesn't really represent cycles. We're not talking about cycles, or like when something's doing this and then doing this. So cycles isn't very good because we're not dealing with cycles. A model of interactions among symbiotes in ecosystem. So symbiotes, this is where we're talking about like mutualism, where they both benefit, or parasitism, where one benefits and one is hurt, or commensalism, where one benefits and the one is unaffected. That's symbiotic relationships. That's not what we're representing here. So this one is definitely it. Flow of matter and energy, the matter being the food, and the energy being the calories in that food within that ecosystem. So that it is. That is your answer. And that is the entire practice test. Obviously, all of the answers were there on the back. And hopefully that explanation helped.